It says a multi-sectoral approach would suffice in dealing with the rising cases of collapsed buildings. Let's take a look at a report that was prepared by Wairimu Njenga yesterday during some awards by the NCA, that's the National Construction Authority, before we delve into the discussion.
Over 87 buildings have collapsed, with over 200 people losing their lives. The collapse of buildings, especially within Nairobi and the satellite towns, has been blamed on poor workmanship and unqualified professionals in the construction industry. National Construction Authority blames property developers, rogue contractors and engineers for undertaking projects without following set out guidelines. NCA General Manager for Registration and Compliance, Susan Ruto, says out of the 26,000 structures inspected across the country, over 60% have been found unfit for habitation.
We do this Construction Excellence Award. It is a way of encouraging also more contractors so that they can also do more work, so that even the collapses can be reduced.
Ruto says the authority has issued several suspension orders to developers.
We have a unit of enforcement whereby once suspension orders are issued, our enforcement unit ensures that there are no any construction work being carried out.
The authority is, however, seeking a multi-sectoral approach in enforcing building regulations to curb the rising cases of collapsed buildings.
Previously, we were working in silos. You find that different agencies, they were working independently. But currently, we realized that this is a concerted effort. It is a collective responsibility, and that is what we are doing.
The authority is exploring the use of drones and other technologies to monitor the sites.
And still on the same, a 2022 audit report by the National Construction Authority, that is NCA, on the collapse of buildings in Kenya places the blame squarely on poor workmanship, that is one, and non-compliance to standards. The report says that 10,791 out of 14,895 buildings were marked as unsafe for occupancy and needed either reinforcement or demolition. And we have seen the last 5 months, around 200 people have lost their lives due to collapsed building. I have in studio a construction and real estate expert who is also a project manager, Nahashon Okowa. Karibu sana, Nahashon.
Thank you very much.
And straight into the topic of discussion, looking at what NCA had lined up and the report that we've just had, it shows that even after years of trying to streamline the sector, we still have a lot of work, a lot of groundwork to cover.
We do, but I mean, if you look at that report, they lay blame everywhere except from themselves, which is unfortunate as well, because as an authority, the people of Kenya mandates them to supervise buildings. 47 million Kenyans cannot supervise buildings, and we delegated that authority to specific agencies to supervise buildings on their behalf, on our behalf, and to lay the blame on, yes, there is poor workmanship and all those other issues they've raised, but the first step needs to be at the authority, because when crimes goes up in the city, we blame the police first, who is supposed to curb crime. When buildings collapse, it's becoming a menace the way it is. We also must go first to the people that are responsible to supervise buildings. So yes, there's a lot of work to be done, but as you can see in the report, in my view, the problem of building collapse, we must start addressing it with the people that are supposed to supervise buildings on our behalf. Then the rest of the things fall into place, because, I mean, the law preempts there will be great developers. The law preempts there will be crime, there will be robbers, and it's put in place measures and authorities to curb those robbers. The law preempts that there will be someone who will want to cut shortcuts in construction and give mandates to the counties, the NEMAs, the NCS to ensure that person don't have the way. So when buildings are collapsing and you blame that person and not yourself, I think there's a problem there that they also need to capture, that there's a problem with authorities supposed to supervise buildings.
Well, and the damage itself, looking at the statistics by NCA, Kenya recorded 87 collapsed buildings over the past 5 years and over 200 lives lost. And we haven't even mentioned the people injured. Over 1,000 people have been maimed. And it begs the question, who is sleeping on the job? Because in as much as we continue trading accusations on either NCA, poor workmanship, poor materials, and even project managers like you have also been on the receiving end. The streamlining of the construction, the county government as well. Sometimes they say we did not give approvals for all this, and it has been a game of trading bulbs at each other.
And that's an unfortunate thing. Remember when Ruma building collapsed, and the head of state actually visited the site, the former president, and gave the authority that will do audit. And I've seen the report that saying 60% of buildings are substandard. I've always asked myself, why don't they publish those buildings for Kenyans to know? Take 3 pages in a daily and list the buildings that have issues so that Kenyans move out. What are they waiting for? So buildings to collapse and then people die, and they keep reminding us they are 60% substandard buildings. The back on building collapse must stop with the people we mandated as a people to supervise. Any other attempt to do that is to create vigilantes to supervise construction. We can't do it. Not every village can do it. The people supervising constructions needs to take the mandate, and then we begin to discuss. Like, I know NCA is short in certain areas. They don't have prosecutor powers. That's a discussion we need to have. Let's discuss personnel for NCA. How many people do they have? All right? Is it commensurate with the growth of construction sector, the buildings? Those are the problems we have, because they have less personnel to supervise. Same to the county. Do they need more funding? I think so. That's the debate we need to have. But it must be with the person we have given the powers in law to supervise the construction sector. Then the rest will follow.
And I remember more than 6 months ago, I had a discussion right here on television with one of the senior officials in the Kiambu County government in charge of planning and housing. And she said that one of the biggest challenge that they have is that sometimes you will find that the approvals are done well. The person is supposed to construct a 5-story building, but along the way, the person becomes greedy and decides it's going to be not going to be 5 floors, it's going to be 8 floors, which now compromises the foundation of the building, which they say, in as much as they try to audit these buildings, it's becoming a challenge as well.
You see, honestly, we are a country that is work in progress. We are a developing country. We have bad eggs amongst us. That's no question. Be it consultants, developer, contractors. We have to admit you have bad eggs amongst us. You see, when on that admission, and I'll tell you, the law requires that before a slab is cast, there's regular supervision of any building by the county inspectorates. Any building. In fact, before a slab is cast, they should inspect. So when someone adds additional floor, and I will get that excuse on NCA that probably cannot arrest, the county has powers to arrest you and take you to court. So when someone adds 2 additional floors, unnoticed, it shows some lacuna, that there's a gap in the way inspectors are doing the building. Either they're made to look away, or there is inadequate building inspectors. That is the debate we have to have. Do we need to reinforce counties, inspectorates, and all those things? That's what we need to have. But corruption is playing a big role here, and in the midst of the greed of developers and the ethics deficit in consultants, we are bound to have these shortcuts in the construction sector. But the regulator, the person who is supposed to enforce, must ensure these people don't have their way. That is what we require as a people. Otherwise, we are asking all of us to supervise buildings. We can't do it.
It's true, we cannot. And another challenge has been building owners have a tendency of engaging professionals right from the beginning, but along the way, or along maybe after 2-3 floors, everything else now they just rely on maybe their foreman or the quacks, as the NCA talks about, which also compromises the structural building.
It does. And you see, I personally called for, we need to criminalize the sale of professional licenses, because what happens is this. When you want to build, you will get the diploma guy, the unqualified quack to do the designs, then you'll come to Nation, because the law requires you to have a licensed architect to get approvals. You'll pay Nation 5,000 to get his license, then go approve and then proceed with the quack. So those are things we need to do. We need to criminalize some of these acts. Like, you cannot sell your license to a crook developer to go build your license, and then you don't supervise. Those are the things we need to do, because consultants also have to blame here. And here I will blame the regulators of consultants, Engineers Board of Kenya, Board of Registration of Architects and Quantity Surveyors. We need to see more action from them, that when a building has gone down, who license was used to approve? Because usually some of them have approvals. Did they supervise? Usually, if you go in town, it's a big business. There are consultants who simply set their licenses at a small fee and they stamp drawings for you, you go and get approval. That is what we need to deal with at first and make it a criminal offense, because you're killing innocent Kenyans with your sale of licenses. That's how they get emboldened to use quacks, and yet behind them there's a name on the board of a person who never went to site. 1 year down the line.
Wow. And still on the same, we have seen some of the on the approvals. We have seen some buildings which, even if you're not a project manager like Nahashon, and even if you are not an engineer, you will see very well that that building is not constructed the place that it should be. Perhaps you find buildings in riparian land. We've seen some buildings in swampy areas, soft soil, and you wonder, how did these people get their approvals?
You see, and that's why it's always very convenient when a building collapses in the year the county says we didn't approve. I mean, unlike crime, a police seated in Central will not know that that's a thief in the middle of Koinange. But buildings come up in glare, in sunlight. Yeah, when quite a building collapsed 7 stories and the county says, no, we didn't approve. Where have you been? I mean, everyone saw the building coming up. So is it lack of your personnel in that area or corruption? Because that's a big issue. Approvals in this town are issued, I always say, on 2 grounds, based on the size of your pocket and sometimes how people wake up. I mean, it's that subjective approval process, and that is a problem. And that's why building comes up in riparian, and those riparian, they are inspectorates. If you go there, you'll find them going all the time. So corruption is playing a key role in this approval menace we're dealing with.
And still on corruption, we have seen some I don't know whether it's the foreman or the coordinators or the project manager in such a project. You will find a project will start very well, but unfortunately they will not follow what exactly is outlined in the approval that they were given, which becomes a little bit hard to track that building down. A practical example, if my house is supposed to go 5 floors and I add another cheeky one or 2, it will be very hard to know exactly what I did. But when that building comes down is when everything now will be discussed. Yeah, we had talked about 5 floors, now you talked about 6 or 7 floors, and then now the law will start turning. It's very hard to track this cheeky businessmen.
It is, you see, let me give a perspective of how that is coming up. Real estate was known to be the booming investment area. And still, the perception of many Kenyans have not changed. They still think it is the era of the boom. It's changed. It's not the era of the supernormal profits. Profits have normalized. However, people do not want to accept that. So this is what happens. And then a lot of developers don't do feasibilities. And the carelessness in management of projects bring in variations. And coupled with that, there are a lot of greed in real estate. It's almost blasphemous greed for some people. So when you begin to construct, costs begin to hit you, variations begin to hit you in terms of variations cost, you're going to make a loss. So you are tempted to say, okay, let me go additional 2 floors so that I can make money. That's how it comes to place. The foundation is you came here to make a lot of money. It's not there anymore, and people must accept that. This is not the industry of 2008, 2010. It's changed. Profits are normalized. Yes, it's still I will say the greatest investment area still, but it's not the boom era. People come with that mentality, and then poorly managed projects with the quacks, they get hit in projects in terms of variations. The thought that will come to rationally to anyone is let's go additional floors. Now, when you go additional floors, they're emboldened by corruption because they know I'll just pay off the inspector that comes until 2 years end and I get my project. And unless the building collapses, you will not know. And I've always said this, you have a lot of illegal buildings in this town. A lot of illegal buildings. If you don't regularize these buildings at some point, one day we'll get a developer and we'll demolish a lot of buildings. And that's the truth, because building plans do not marry with what is built on the ground. And a lot of projects are like that. And until it collapses, you will not know.
And Hashon, I've seen, I don't know whether it's NCA or who does that, who marks the building that this building is unsafe. But you will find still people living in that building, there are authorities. We can see it has been painted red, meaning that it shouldn't be there. It should be brought down or it should be reinforced, just like NCA said. But you will find people are living there. And we have authorities. Even we have an area chief and assistant chief. We have the area sub-area. We have a lot of authority or a lot of offices that can actually move in with speed to quell that. Because as long as a building is marked, is not fit for people to live in, it should be brought down.
I agree. And you see, that's why personally I think we need to begin by amending the NCA Act. You see, NCA has no prosecutorial powers. They don't have it. I think at some point there was a discussion to have a department at the DPP. It didn't work out. I think now they're partnered with the interior government, police to arrest. It's chaos. We created a big watchdog for the construction sector and didn't give that dog the teeth to bite. All they can do is mark. And outside marking, if you're continuing the building, there's nothing they can do. NCA is not like NEMA and county. Those guys will arrest you and have those processes of prosecution. They don't have it. And we must amend that act, I was saying, so that that red mark, themselves, because that red mark means a lot of things, can now begin to arrest and take you to court. And until we have those gaps, whatever you're saying will be a problem for us. And those are the areas we must reinforce as early as this year, that the NCA Act of 2016, we must amend it properly and give them teeth. So that if they don't arrest now, and people are well educated, because now the unfortunate thing as well is, you see that mark, and I've always discussed this with the officials of NCA. If they mark the building and then I for example, comply, they have no white mark to come and erase it. So sometimes those buildings that are marked as well partly have complied. No one has no idea. But let's begin to give them the power so that they know we can arrest, not necessarily relying on interior government or DPP to prosecute. Then the issue of the red mark will be squarely light on NCA. We can't leave it to local administrators. Those are the things we must embolden.
It's true. And Hashon, I'm quite sure you're also disturbed when you see buildings collapse in the country and lives lost, and not to mention how many millions go down. We haven't even mentioned the people who are maimed or who are injured or killed. Matters insurance. I have been to a WhatsApp group where we were contributing some money because unfortunately we had some people from home who a building collapsed. There's no insurance. They didn't have medical insurance. Now we had to cater for that. We haven't had a case where a building collapses, the owner is arrested because maybe he did not follow the approvals that were laid down, and we haven't had anything on insuring of the people who lose their lives or who are maimed by the collapsed building.
Yes, which is very unfortunate. That hasn't happened. And the second thing that hasn't happened is we've never seen a developer prosecuted to the end in all these menace. But look, partly I believe we need to have, like, if you go to the UK, I think the UK and India has it. There's what you call the structural warranties of buildings and structural insurance of buildings. It's a 10-year period. And those are the things, those are discussions we must have now as a people, that we must insure buildings structurally with insurance, so that if something happens, the insurance also will bring another layer on the inspectorate, because for them to insure your building, they will ensure the procedure was followed. Just another layer we bring. And then in case of eventualities, those kind of things happen. However, during construction period, there's insurance. There's what we call the contractor all risk insurance. Now, if the site was being run by professionally, by a registered contractor and professionals, usually you'll have the contractor all risk insurance, and then the WIBA, Workers' Injuries Benefit Act insurance. That also is then, it's a low requirement for any site to have that. However, that will be effective if the site was being run professionally. If that guy was a quack developer or a grid developer, you realize all down through, those things will not be there. But there is a requirement that a site have what we call contractor all risk and the WIBA for the injuries for all the workers on site. Yes.
That is why sometimes, because of the person contravened the law, that is why you find that people are not insured.
Absolutely. If you begin with shortcuts, if you begin to get a quack architect, definitely you'll have a quack contractor. Because and I say this all the time, registered contractors will give you some bulletproof as a developer, because they will not allow certain things to happen. They will ensure there is performance bond, there is the all risks, there is the workers' injury, the contractor is qualified, and then you secure your investment. But if that guy on the top begins with grid, Trust me, all the way down, including the buyers will be hurtier, because that's how you end up with these projects that don't even exist.
And I don't know whether matters building and constructions is a devolved function, but looking at county governments, every time we hear a collapsed building, the first place we go is the NCA, the National Construction Authority. But the county governments also have ministries which look into matters, housing, real estate, buildings, but we don't see them quite vigilant in terms of ensuring that those buildings which have been earmarked for demolition or for reinforcement, that is done. I think this is a place that we need to exploit, because we are always looking at the national government, and some of the devolved functions, maybe we can chip in so that we may save lives.
I totally agree. Actually, in that, if you check those authorities, I think NCA is the bottom. Even in the approvals, they come at the bottom. The biggest responsibility for building supervision lies with the county government. They are the people that approve drawings. NCA does not approve drawings. NCA register projects and then register contractors. The people that approve developments and are supposed to check that the structural drawings conforms, the drawing is okay, the steel in the columns are okay, are the counties. All right? And that's why we have also have this debate. We need to decide who want to give this mandate, because that's why this back always continues. Building collapse, county, NCA, county, NCA. Who is supposed to do it? Right now, as we speak, the biggest responsibility of buildings lies with county governments. They approve every single drawing. The guy that approves the drawings is the guy that is mandated to the lives of Kenyans, not the guy that simply registers projects. That's not the guy. And they have gotten away with it so much, and NCA has taken the hit, which is unfortunate. So those are the things we need to streamline in this sector. If we don't streamline these things, buildings are going to collapse.
And Nahashon, it's a good thing that you mentioned about the NCA Act, which in your view as a project manager, you would like to see it amended so that it may incorporate a lot of things, including the teeth, just like you say. And looking at the law and how it is now, and we don't hear any amendment on the way, that coupled with corruption, you will bear me witness, there are some county officials who are quite corrupt. And NCA did mention that these people who are compromised already, they have already compromised the building. Whether the building will collapse or not, they have already compromised the building, because they have already been compromised. And now it's a wait-and-see game on whether this building is going to collapse or not. I would like you to touch on that, because we have a lot of corruption in the country and even in the building sector.
Absolutely. It's corruption and then coupled with our, what I will call, ethics deficit. Corruption in county government is really entrenched, all right? If you go for approvals in Nairobi County, you'll be so surprised at the amount of money you are expected to pay. And that's why even some of us were telling the governor, remove the entire technical committee, bring new people. By the time they land, probably will be next election. Again, do like that, because it's a circle of people that are so entrenched. There is no much thought in supervising buildings. Actually, let me shock you. Ask how many architects are in the county to check drawings, or engineers, proper registered engineers. You'll be surprised how many there are. I think there's only one in Nairobi County. All right, I stand corrected. Now, how many buildings are going up in Nairobi County? A lot. So who is checking these buildings? So corruption is our biggest enemy here. And in my view, it's what is driving a lot of illegal and planned buildings, for example, in Nairobi. Buildings all over without any single plan. We are destroying an entire city because of unplanned buildings. Now, if we don't address that, and that's why on buildings collapse, NCA for me is at the bottom. Yeah, of course, they don't escape the shackles of corruption as well in the officials, but the biggest mandate is on the county, including supervising, approving, and all those things. We're in a big mess.
Do you believe that you have to go for the approvals before you start the building? And then you're given all the approvals, you construct your building, and then if it's a commercial building, you let tenants in. Do you believe maybe after the building is constructed, it should be inspected before it is commercialized? This is why I'm saying this.
Yes.
Okay. I'm saying this because if at all my building was supposed to be 5 floors and I've constructed 6 or 7 floors, 2 of which are illegal, then when the building is being inspected before I commercialize it, then these are some of the things, some of the loopholes that can be seen. And if at all there is a law that I contravene, that is the best place to point it out.
100%. I mean, the County Government Act is very clear. You get approval. Actually, by the time you're paying for approvals, all right, you're paying for occupation license. The law requires that once you finish the building, and the architect has issued what we call the architect certificate of practical completion, that signifies the project is complete. The architect, that document, the engineer write indemnity letters to the county and tells them we've supervised the building. The county is required to come and inspect the building and then give the developer what we call the occupation certificate, meaning the building certifies the intention for the public. That's why I said this mandate is with the people we've authorized, because they're supposed to check that building. You and I can occupy it safely. Now, what happens? They don't even go to site. It's a question of my building is complete, apply, I pay something, and I get the occupation certificate. But the law is, I mean, the law is there on that. That comes supervise, inspect, and then give me occupation license. Do they inspect? They don't.
And there's also something that came up in that report by NCA. Some blame has been put squarely on poor materials and poor workmanship. You will find that after we've gotten all the approvals, but when it comes to the sourcing of the mafundis and the korogas, as they are called, you find that a lot of people would want a lot of cheap labor. And when we have poor workmanship, you don't expect, despite the approvals, you don't expect that building to stand, or maybe it's going to develop. We've seen cracks, we've seen some of the buildings lean, we've seen some of the buildings even collapse as well.
Look, in my view, that is again the bottom of my list of reasons of why buildings are collapsing. It is a problem, but it's not the major problem. Because if you understand how a project works, the rigorous process of doing a project, the rigorous process of doing a structure, if you have a registered engineer, all materials are tested before they're used. He approves every single thing, plus the source. You cast a slab, we do what we call cube test, to test the slab, the strength of that slab at that point. All right? It cannot collapse. If you are a proper registered consultant, a building cannot collapse, even with the issue of substandard materials. I mean, I've been on projects for 12 years where we've returned so many sand and ballast from our sites because they're substandard. We've returned steel from our sites because they're substandard. So if you are professionals who understand construction, those substandard materials will not slip into site. If they will slip into site, you begin to have a problem. The problem we have here is you have people who are running projects who are not supposed to run those projects. That is the quack issue. But the rigorous process of doing a structure only, I mean, it will be really unlikely for buildings collapse under a registered engineer.
And according to the World Bank, I see Kenya has a housing deficit of at least 2 million houses, which increases by around 200,000 units per year. And I think that is why housing was one of the big four agenda. And we have seen the president now talk about a lot of housing projects and say that the Kazi Mtaani, or those who are working in the Kazi Mtaani, will be transferred to the construction of the affordable housing units in the country, just to underscore the housing deficit that we have in the country. I think that is why perhaps we are seeing a lot of quacks, because the industry is quite robust. How is it post-COVID?
No, I think we've begun on a good note now. I mean, the year after election is always fantastic for us in the construction sector. We suffer towards the election a lot. We almost come to a grind. 1 year after elections, the industry is picking up well. Though I have seen that the steel prices have gone up globally by 30% again. So we expect that to hit us, I think, by February, March. You're going to have another real problem on steel prices again. But generally, it's looking good. We have, I mean, only 16% of Kenyans own houses. Only 16%.
16%?
Yeah, only 60% of Kenyans own houses. So there is a big gap. There's a big gap. And for a second administration running, we've got the government's attention on housing, which is a good thing. Now, whether they will succeed or not, we want them to succeed. Personally, I do. but they have to get some certain things right from the previous administration, what they got wrong, because that was a total failure. They must correct those mistakes. The cost of construction is still a major problem in this country. That is our elephant in the room. Construction costs and land. If you deal with those two items, you deal with the affordable housing. And also, I mean, we also need to discuss whether do we need ownership or not. I don't think we need ownership in this country. We need housing. If you check at Article 43(1)(b) of the Constitution, it's the right to housing. It's not a right to ownership. Ownership is ownership is at the bottom list of most Kenyans.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
Ownership is at the bottom list of most Kenyans. Kenyans have most Kenyans want decent housing. They live on $1 a day, all right? So they want housing. Probably, I mean, I've discussed this with my peers and some government colleagues, and I keep telling them, go the Nordic way, give long-term rents. We do not need everyone to own houses. Long-term rent of 30 years can work for some people, so that they put meals on their table. So I think it is a right to housing or ownership. We are debating that with them, so that we don't have spectacular failure like the previous administration. But it's a good thing for the government to have agenda on housing. I think it's fantastic.
Again, I will say it's an interesting way of how you're seeing it, because that's a very interesting way, because I've lived in the same house for the last 11 years. And we're talking about long-term leasing. I think that will be affordable for a lot of Kenyans, as opposed to trying mortgage ownership or even buying.
It will. And if you ask me, developing countries must deal with housing deficit in terms of housing and not ownership. We conflate housing and ownership a lot. The right to housing in Article 43(1)(b) is a housing right, not an ownership right. People that live in the slums want decent housing. It's not a must that they own those houses. All right, owning them is the least of their intentions. They want better schools and all those other things. So we must remove our government fixation with housing, like you pay to own, pay to own. No, you can also pay to rent. And the Nordic countries of Sweden, Finland, Switzerland, Iceland, Norway are a fantastic model of long-term rents that are working for those countries, and they've addressed our housing deficit, so that we don't have to bog people down with, we need to own houses. And it's gone down to the middle class. Everyone wants to own a house. And sometimes it's not even prudent to own a house. I mean, you have 8 million, you could invest it somewhere and continue renting your house. That's a discussion we must have as a people. And if you're going to achieve that deficit, I think ownership would be the bottom of that list. We need housing, not ownership.
Now, Hashon, I would like to shift focus a bit, because when you talk about housing, and especially these commercial buildings here in big towns, and especially in Nairobi, we have seen a lot of billboards, and they are quite strong and quite huge. When they collapse, it's more or less like another building collapsing, because we have seen some billboards come tumbling down. And this is something, I think it's a gray area. I don't know anything about how the approvals that are given for billboards and where you should put a billboard in a building. You find a building that is quite high, and you see the billboard quite high. And unfortunately, if anything happens to that because of either the billboard was not well reinforced, we have seen them coming down. We haven't had any incident yet of taking life, but it's also a concern. There are so many billboards in big towns.
I mean, yes, I've seen them as well. I know majority, like in cities, lie with the counties. And again, greed is taking a great effect. I mean, we're putting billboards literally everywhere. In residential houses, you see on the back of residential houses, there are billboards. Literally, there's a fight for billboard spaces. And if you have to organize the city, I know the ones on the highways are with either Kena or Kura, because they have to be done on the road reserves and all those stuff. What I know for sure, I don't think there is thought on design and the structural billboards that are done. We've left them for commercial spaces and the people that are supposed to erect them to decide how they are erected. And as you say, it's a time bomb. It's a powdered cake we have in our hands. And you know, we are always reactive. When one will come down, and then we'll say, okay, now let's look at all the billboards. But it's a concern that some of us in the construction sector, and also how they're built, you know, how they're built. If you check how Safaricom and Airtel build their towers, they're professional engineers behind them. I stand corrected, but I don't think there's much engineering behind some of these billboards being erected.
Indeed, and because I'm talking from a point of experience, because one billboard is about 10 meters by 12 meters. So we're talking about an average-sized manor with 10 and then another 12. So you can imagine, it might seem a little or might seem quite small while it's in a building, but it's a very huge and very huge metals that are used. So in case of anything and it comes tumbling down, then we have issues. Unfortunately, as you said, it's also another gray area.
It is.
The counties, because now we have the devolved units. What are some of the responsibilities that they should take in matters construction and buildings?
In my view, I think the counties have the perfect laws. I do not see an amendment required to the regulations that county have. And in case counties, I mean, it's so easy for them they can go through the assembly and quickly bring regulations. But if you look at Nairobi County, for example, I mean, they have just perfect laws, zonings that they're not following. If only we just stuck to what the law says, that a building bedroom window needs to be 2.4 meters away from the boundary. That's what the code says, all right? So that there's a breathing space, and the lounge one needs to be, I think, 3 meters away from the boundary line. You give people decency to live, because the right to a good city is a human right. This is a human right for us, for people like us. Let's just follow the law. If we follow the law and approve buildings as per the law, we'll have a great city. And now sometimes when you say this, people think like we don't want the skyscrapers. We want the skyscrapers. But the path to uncoordinated, uncontrolled buildings is not the path to a great city. The great cities before us have planned that path. We are not planning it. I mean, look at what is happening in the Kileleshwas and the Kilimanis. Those are legally, as I speak to you, those zones are zone 3 and 4 and Westlands. That is 3-4 stories. That is what the law says as we speak. It's not been changed up to date. We must regularize that law so that we know Kileleshwa is 15 floors or 18 floors. When my neighbor is building, I know he'll go 18. So that when I build, I plan with that in mind. But right now, even if I got 12 floors, my neighbor can do 20. There's no guidance to how that is done. And that's why I wrote about it somewhere. We are seeing the rise of vigilante residence associations. It's going to be a big fight. And as I said, the courts must prepare a special court. If we go with this direction of buildings coming up, and residents are going to arm themselves with serious court cases. You've seen it in Karen. A lot of petrol stations are being fought here and there. Kilimani has a big fight with developers. It should not happen. This mandate should be with the county. If county follows the law and then consult developers and them as us, that mandate as well, we'll not have these issues. But as it's still, a lot of buildings will be challenged. A lot of buildings are going to be fought with residents, because residents are beginning to take that mandate of supervising their neighborhoods. Let's just follow the law in counties.
All right, and I'll pick it from where you've left it, matters courts. We've seen a lot of buildings. We're talking about 87 buildings in the last 5 years and 200 people dead, over 1,000 injured. But we haven't had 10 building owners serving a 10-year term or a 20-year term because they didn't follow the procedure that was supposed or was laid down, and people lost their lives. We are not hearing this. We are only adding dead bodies, but we are not adding people in the jail.
And I don't think we're about to hear that for some time.
Why is that?
There's so many gaps. As I said, there's so many gaps in how these buildings are approved. First of all, if a building was approved, there's a mandate of the county to supervise. They also didn't do their work in that process. Coupled with corruption. Yeah, I think we're still a country where you are innocent until proven rich, in my view. All right? So, in my view, we still work with, and you're innocent until proven rich.
Yeah.
With that, cases drag 10 years and 20 years and all those things. And as I said, since in my practice, and this is my 13th years in this field, I've seen so many buildings collapse and no developer prosecuted. And I don't think it will happen because the people who are supposed to take this initiative, NCA has no prosecutor power, so you're leaving it to NEMA and what county, the people
and the
that
DPP.
and DPP and the people who are supposed to supervise as well. So they also fail in their duty to supervise. How will they prosecute you? So we must have a total dynamic shift and change of mentality if you're going to stop building collapse. Otherwise, it will collapse.
I totally concur, because I also report from the courts, and for the last 5 years, we've not had any conviction. Yes, a lot of people have been brought because of contravening the laws that are laid down, but we've never had a conviction in the last 5 years, at least from my own view and reporting from the court for the last 5 years. But we are hoping at least, as you said, the NCA Act, if it is amended, it will incorporate all these and also some stringent laws. Do you believe we need to tighten some laws?
We need to. Another law we need to introduce is on developers. You know, this real estate sector is regulated for everyone except the person that pays everyone. There's no law that regulates developers. I mean, you can walk out tomorrow from here and be a developer. All right? And that brings the issue of off-plan sales and how people are conned, because there is no law that regulates developers. We must regulate developers in this country. We must amend the NCA Act and give them more teeth to bite. So when a building collapses, there's no excuse of we can't prosecute. You have the powers with you to prosecute and supervise. I also say I think we need to return NCA levy at the risk of going against my colleagues. Just like for NEMA we've returned. Those bodies are underfunded. When we remove the NCA and NEMA levy, at least NEMA has got the levy back. Let's give NCA levy back. It's not achieved what we intended it to achieve when we removed it. Give them money back. They can hire enough personnel as possible. So when a building collapses, they don't have any excuse. We want more than a press statement from these authorities.
And it's a good thing that you brought about that, because I wanted to ask the next question. How do we increase capacity for all those mandated to look into the construction industry in the country, including NEMA, including NCA? Just like you said, as we began this discussion, is that NCA, yes, is that big black dog, but it has no teeth to bite.
It doesn't. And you see, it has no prosecutorial powers, and it has no proper funding. In 2017, I think just after elections, the administration removed NEMA and levy fees of NCA and NEMA. And I personally had an issue with it. And because they're saying, oh, we want to lower the cost of housing. Those fees are the least significant in doing a feasibility on a house, in terms of affecting the price. And what they did, we now started funding it from the exchequer. I mean, we all know how we are suffering as a country in terms of our brokenness. So those bodies that are funded. So NCA, that is supposed now to supervise, have been doing a lot of trainings, in my view, because they want revenue. Training contractors, they are always in training. Give NCA the money, and that money, give it from the people that are building. Same as NEMA. I mean, if you look at the polluter pay principle, he who pollutes should pay. That's why that levy should be paid by developers. Why should the exchequer pay that money on behalf of developers? Give them the levy. Let's give them the prosecutor powers. When the next building collapses, let's see what that press statement says. Because right now, they have a lot of excuses that they will give us. And as long as they give us excuses like that, buildings are going to collapse. For the counties have the money. The counties just need to get rid of corruption. Counties have enough resources, and they just need to hire personnel and supervise our buildings. I don't think there's anything else required in the county apart from leadership.
And let's look at urban planning, because you might have very good buildings, but the way they are planned, you'll find that you'll have a lot of challenges in terms of motion, in terms of drainage systems, in terms of sewerage systems. But we are seeing sometimes in some estate, you look at an estate and you wonder, who did the urban planning? Because let's give a practical example. When there is a fire somewhere, you find that it becomes so hard for fire engines to make their way to where the fire is. And it's more or less because of how it was planned. And if you look at the approvals of these guys who built those buildings, you will find that they had all ticks. They ticked all the boxes in terms of the approvals before they started the building.
I mean, urban planners have failed us in this country. And to say failure is, honestly, it's an understatement. It's more than that. I mean, I think 2 weeks ago we were discussing about the Eastlands and how we are disenfranchising the children in terms of ricket disease. Buildings can't access sunlight, and we are in the tropics. It's a problem, and a whole generation is in problems. Children who stay indoors January to January because there's no place, and they can't access sunlight. It's a big issue down there, all right? But you see, Nairobi has grown exponentially. In 2000, we were 2.1 million people. Last census, we were 4.2. We have almost doubled. But our sewer systems, our stormwater drainage, our roads have not grown commensurate to that growth. Remember, we have one of the highest urbanization rates at 4.4%. One of the highest population growth rate. All right? So we are the statistics say we receive almost 500,000 people in urban centers yearly, and it's not just unique to us. The continent of Africa receives around 40,000 people daily to cities. It's a problem we are going to face. We must expand ourselves. We must coordinate properly, and our planning is at the threshold of that planning. Now we have a big problem in terms of planning. We are blocking our riparian reserves, we are blocking our road reserves, we are blocking our power lines, we are blocking everything at the cheer of those who are supposed to approve and inspect.
Yes, you've seen even when somebody wants to shift that you have to tie your things with ropes because nobody can be able to access the building itself. And that building passed all the approvals that was supposed to.
Absolutely.
And it's an urban. It's an urban setting.
And that's why I say the absence, the gap is not the law. I mean, I've seen people pulling sofa sets to their rooms.
Yes.
It's a common phenomenon in other parts of this city. And yet, there's a code of how big that staircase needs to be. It's there. How big the door needs to be. Standard door is there. It's science thought through. Who is supposed to implement that? It is the authority. You and I cannot go around supervising buildings. We'll be strangers. But the authority can go and check that every single building conforms to what the code says. And that's why I say this mess we see around, we must lay it squarely to people that we have mandated and are paying through our taxes to supervise.
Yes, and let's now shift gears because of the interest of time to real estate. There's something I was able to pick from what you're saying, that each and every election cycle you quite suffer some losses in terms of how the politics of Kenya polarize the economy. So how is the sector now? Because a lot of people will ask, do I build, do I mortgage, or do I buy a totally constructed buildings? Because if I have to buy a commercial building, and I will look at all the approvals and I'll look at the building itself, then I will be able to evade a lot of questions later on in terms of how the building has been constructed.
Look, honestly, the debate of whether to build or buy is a large debate. I've been asked so many times that question. There is no clear-cut answer. There are a number of considerations you need to put in place to decide whether you need to buy. The bottom line of those two is vigilance. Whether you're going to build or you're going to buy, on a developing country, you're going to be extremely vigilant as a person. If you don't have time, if you're the busy type, forget about building. You'll build 2 houses for the foreman and yourself. Buy a house. But you have to be extremely vigilant. There's a process of how you need to check that the building conforms before you pay. The real estate sector is moving to satellite towns. All right? I know there are some pseudo analysts that have been talking about the bubble. There's no bubble coming. As I say, it's only 60% of us own houses. It's a big gap. The top of this pyramid is full. The high-end housing is getting saturated. And those who have been saying bubble have been looking at the high-end. The fact that the high-end market is full doesn't mean that there's no market. It's a big market. It's moving to satellite towns. That's where real estate is moving. Any wise investor in real estate must start thinking of the satellite towns of Nairobi. That's where it's moving. And that we are beginning to sort out the housing for the middle class, what we call the middle end and the low end. That's where it's moving to. Still the most attractive in my view, higher returns more than TBs, whatever it is you're looking at. But it requires ruthless vigilance from a developer and the buyer. Yes.
And it's a good thing that you've been able to observe that, because we're looking at Kitengela, we're looking at Juja, Ruiru, Machakos. We see that a lot of buildings are coming up. More or less people are now concentrating on satellite towns, as you have rightly put it. Now, because the building industry here in the country, looking at the Big Four agenda, it didn't quite, if we look at it keenly, is that it didn't achieve what it was supposed to do. And still building on that is the president, the current president, William Ruto, is still more or less like building on the small gains that the Big Four, one of the Big Four agenda, housing, has been able to get. Because he talked about more youths to be employed as we go on to launch new projects, as we go on to construct new buildings so that Kenyans can own their own houses. Yeah.
Yes, I mean...
Are we moving somewhere? Have we done anything? Because the big four agenda did not, the housing, we've made the housing pillar.
We've made meaningful progress, and I was a big critic of the Jubilee administration housing agenda. I was a big critic from day one because its premise was wrong, in my view. All right, I don't even want to come to the debate of whether government needs to build houses or not. That's a whole debate with different views. But 500,000 housing per year, 500,000 housing, so they targeted in 5 years. President Ruto has targeted 250 annually. Actually, it's targeted to meet because our housing demand annually is 250. I think it's more than 250 because we've thrown 250 for the last decade. It's more than 250. So our demand is 250. Then we supply 50,000. So we have a deficit of 200. He wants to do 250. In my view, the premise of how he started it is almost the same as what Uhuru started it. It's a wrong premise, in my view. The debate on affordable housing must begin with addressing the cost of construction, which we've not. I mean, this month alone, we've tripled the capital gain tax for real estate and construction from 5% to 15%. How are we going to lower these prices? So, you see, it doesn't matter whether you employ the Juakali person to do the doors. The cost of steel is the same.
Yeah.
If that steel price is high, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who does the koroga. If the cement price is high, it's high. So if you do your feasibility on that premise of high cost, you'll always end up with a higher price that common man cannot buy a house.
Okay.
Number two, I think we must remove what I call the financialization of housing. We must treat that housing as a right and not an area of investment. Make it almost a non-profit.
Indeed, and thank you so much for your insight. I have been speaking to Okoa Nahashon, who is a project manager. We are trying to put things into perspective when it comes to buildings, and especially in urban centers. We have witnessed a lot of people die. In the last 5 years, we have over 200 people who have been killed when buildings collapsed, and we have over 1,000 who have been injured. We're trying to put a few things here and there to see how we can be able to help that industry. The counties, as well as Nahashon has rightly put it, is that they have a responsibility as well. And also you, as a Mwananchi, you have responsibility as well. We've seen buildings that have been marked for demolition and people are still living in those houses. Well, now we are going to be looking at the state of politics in the country. And yesterday we were treated to some statistics which have made a lot of Kenyans smile and also wonder exactly how did the National Bureau of Statistics also come up with that. We have seen the demographic survey that was released yesterday, and also the politics of the day that will be coming up in the next 5 minutes or so. I will be engaging advocate of the High Court and a governance expert, Gibson Nyamato Gisore, and I'll also be having a governance expert, Alenga Tolsten, in the next hour, so don't worry.
What am I even thinking? My Jenny's in Denmark now. You know what I don't like the most about you? Not only are you subpar, but you find excuses for your mistakes and waste everyone's time.
Dear Julia, work is important, yes, but never forget, we are a sweet home.
I'm going to keep my word. I'm going to keep it. I'll keep it.
Listen to me. Something happened at the hotel today, and you're totally not going to believe it. For now, I won't tell her. But honestly speaking... Oh... Harvey, bye. You almost knocked me off balance today.
put you on a pedestal here? He won't throw you out on the street when I tell him what you really are? When I tell him the truth? Don't you think he'll do that? You shut up! Who is your lover? Who are you betraying my father with? Tell me! The one who has a lover is you! What happened was that I saw you. I'm well aware it was you who started the fire.
Speak up! Where did you get the idea that Malena has a lover?
Malena! Malena is cheating on you, Daddy. Your wife has a lover.
Your presence has never been an issue with my family.
I don't want to compete with Fabiola. In spite of it all, I still do love her.
Right from the start. If I have a lover, you gotta show me there's a future in this. You gotta show me something. You not bring no guns down. You should have left them at home. Should have bring love down. I say spread the joy around. Tell me what to do or what to say to make it right. 'Cause I need your arms around me every night. For me in a reggae party, me the shita. Me have a drink in me left and me right and have a spliff of marijuana.
Na ni uongo pia that aliacha kazi Kisima Drops.
Vile aliacha kazi na hii ni kesi mbili tofauti.
Oh my God, Melissa!
No.
But she's still my daughter, regardless. Not a word about this to anyone. It stays between us.
But Melissa,
She doesn't need to know this.
doesn't need to know what?
Listen.
Naye Mtume Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam anashauri kuwa kuna zama ambazo itafikia ambazo binadamu atakuwa anaamka akiwa ni Muislamu lakini jioni atazamia akiwa ni kafiri.
Harakisheni kwenda kufanya matendo mema lillah. Na yale matendo mema yawe na sharti mbili. Iwe mukhlasa lillah, ufanye na ikhlasi lillah kwa ajili ya Allah. Ukiswali swali lillah kwa ajili ya Allah.
KBC Channel 1, we put people at the heart of events with our captivating weekly news features. Every day, we are breaking new grounds with informative, entertaining, and inspiring human interest stories. On Mondays, 9 p.m., we have The Cabinets. Tuesday, 9 p.m., we get inside the barracks for military tales. We delve in the world of cinemas and theater each Wednesday night. For the young and industrious, make a date with us every Thursday at 9 p.m. Fridays are dedicated for my culture. On Saturdays, we go back in time for history in perspective. And on Sundays, we get to know the process of how things are done and made. KBC Channel 1 News features a whole lot of wonderful viewing experience.
Welcome to the second part of News Check. Just in case you joined us, Lucy Maura is our sign language interpreter. My name is Njue, and now I'm engaging two panelists, as I had mentioned earlier on. We're looking at the state of politics and matters in the country. I have in studio an advocate of the High Court and who is a constitutional lawyer. We have Gibson Gisore, who we have done a lot of work with.
Yes.
Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you, Ben. Happy to be here and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I haven't seen each other this year.
Yes.
We also have another resident analyst here at KBC, Torstad Alenga. Alenga, karibu sana.
Asante sana, shukran. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, my brother.
Glad to see you.
Now, before even we look at what the head of state talked about in Matters Chebukati, a survey, if you look at the dailies today, they're talking about the survey by the National Bureau of Statistics and also the National Council on Population Development. They released a survey yesterday which has generated a lot of debate, not only in social media. I was looking at today's dailies, and one of the dailies is talking about the headline, a cheating nation. Gentlemen, I'm quite sure you did follow up on how things were and how they announced this. But one thing that caught my eye is that they talked about since independence, there have been an average of 7 members. When people get married, they get about 7 kids, but now they are opting for 2 or 3 kids. And talking about fertility going down. Council, do you believe it's fertility going down, or what exactly is happening?
I don't believe Kenyan can be infertile.
Why is that? But statistics are showing that the population growth is now stalling.
I think what Kenyans are opting to do is family planning, which is proving to be a success. In that, the economy is also not doing so well. So you cannot have, for example, in Nairobi, you cannot have 7 kids unless you are out of your mind, because you think about schooling, you think about healthcare, you think about providing the needs for these kids. It's astronomical. So the best thing people are opting, and as I think I listened to what the people who released the survey were actually saying, that's a proof that Kenyans are actually following through with what is called family planning, which has been a program which has been implemented since independence, and is one of the success cases or stories of Africa. You remember, like our neighbor Uganda is the youngest country in the world. The average age in Uganda is 16. Yes. So that cannot be compared with Kenya, which has really embraced family planning. People are sensitized, and these things happen in the context of people having gone to school. It means the girl child in Kenya is well educated to understand the aspects of family planning, so that they can be able to, because really family planning is more of a control from the woman perspective. Of course, a man, much as you might tell me, then if the lady cannot be able to understand it and be able to apply it, then that becomes a challenge. So it's I think something which we need to look at positively and say that this is a result which has been practiced over time, and we are reaping the fruits. It's not like it's the fertility which has gone down. It's about the economics, it's about the population growth and the economy, and whoever has been planning it should be able to be happy and say that at least we are achieving something.
Alenga, do you concur with what Council is talking about? Is that what we have embraced in terms of matters family planning is really working, and that is why, and also the economy is quite charred?
I think I totally want to agree with Wakili's point of view that it's not really infertility to say that maybe Kenyan people are less fertile over the years, but there are silent antecedent variables that underpin that kind of result. And most fundamentally to look at is the uptake of family planning, as it has been alluded earlier. and also the issue of increased abortions in the country, and so then it drives us to contemplate whether this uptake of family planning is a good thing for the country going forward, or it's something that is going to give us another problem later on. If you look at the situation right now, Troy, you'll realize children start up on family planning even in secondary schools, and that is something they are being maybe told by their parents, because the parents want to substitute raising a child in a proper way with just mitigating a pregnancy. So you find Form 2s, Form 1s are already being introduced to family planning contraceptives by their parents, and at a very young age, in their teens actually. So maybe when they reach in the late 20s or the mid 20s there, we do not know really what would happen to them. So that then opens a new area of research to see what is the impact of this in the long run.
And as also we interrogate because a lot of the discussion has come about when we talk about what exactly is happening in the country. An interesting one also is half married women don't want to have babies. And could we be staring at what is happening in Europe, where people even are being rewarded so that they may get more kids to boost up the population? Or is it because of the lifestyle that people are living and the way things have changed? Could it be a contributing factor?
It could be a contributing factor. Remember now we live in a global village, Bentroy, and a lot of things which are happening in various countries, especially in the Western countries, which do influence what happens around greatly through the social media, through the other channels. Even the kind of research we do is actually based on whatever standards they decide to put across. So if we can be able to look at it from that perspective, yes, we can say it could be that. Secondly, it could be the issue of there's an underlying problem of families breaking down. And with the sensitized women now, or women who have gone to school, they try to look at the circumstances under which they are likely to raise a kid alone. Because they also talked about, I think the survey or somewhere else I read that like in Kenya, we could be doing 20 to 30% or 30, if I'm not wrong, around 30, I'm not so sure of the numbers, but it should be around there, that are single family homes, where it's a single parent, most likely it's a woman. So that could be also another factor which is making them feel like it's better to be single without someone than have a kid and struggling, especially with the economy, which is also not doing well. So if we can look at it from those two perspectives, then it can give the impetus that now I think I'm better off until I find that man whom I will want to start a family with, which anyway I'm not sure whether we will do that. So there's that perspective at the back of their mind that this may not work. So the reason I also say that is because as a practitioner of family law, I have even friends of mine who just come, they ask for advice how to get married. Once they are married, I think 8 months down, they are not together. They even come to you personally and tell you, Wakili, when you litunganisha ikitu, you told us this thing it's not working. Tell us how soon can we be apart. So and it's quite a number. The numbers are alarming. So we need to look at things from both ends and be able to say that there could be a problem which we need to look at. There could be a societal issue which we also need to look at. But I think among the things we need to look at as a country, or whoever is doing the research, I hope the recommendations or his recommendation should be able to reflect that something needs to be done, and this should be done in the circumstances whereby society has to be socialized differently. But key among those, I think, is the economy. If people can be able to have money in their pockets and be able to have houses, there's really no problem of raising a family. Or if we come up with social schemes for education and health, because those are some of the key issues, and housing is good. The government is coming up with the housing schemes for the young people, because really that's where the problem is. Because once a young man, you're assured of getting a house, you can't live there alone. You don't want to live it with start a family there. Once you start a family, once you're assured that there's a good social health scheme where you can, and then of course the education is covered or well taken care of, then there's really no problem of raising even 7 kids as people would have anticipated.
Just like we always had.
Yes, but now in the current circumstances, there's every reason to give up on starting a family.
Yes, and you see, Lenga, people are more or less, if you ask me, embracing what we are seeing the West do, where you have, and despite the fact that you have a lot of money or wealth, you choose to have 1 or 2 kids. Perhaps that is why the numbers keep dwindling, just like they were announced yesterday. And there are people who just want to be together, but they do not want to have kids. And we are seeing this, something that we have seen from the Western nations. But now we are seeing it right here at home. But as Wakili has said, people begin and then say, whoa, this is not what I expected. We took for ground different. And then they ask Wakili again, can we do a divorce?
I think that part of the survey I really want to differ with, because if you look at the best quality of research work is after you have completed your research, you juxtaposition it with previous research and other data that is operational at the time, so that you can discount your facts or strengthen your facts thereby. If you look at the population of the country for the last 3 decades, it has demonstrated that there's exponential growth of the population. So that would really conflict with their finding that birth rates are going down. And secondly, there are also other things we need to put into perspective, like the high cost of living. Probably the high cost of living would force people into cohabitation with the intent of raising a child, because of the fear of the unknown. And then the question of contraceptives now also comes in. Thirdly, we have issues of health, sexual and reproductive health issues. There are possibly people that may not conceive a child because of 1, 2, 3 issues. Some of them are maybe as a result of maybe wrong procedures in the past, maybe cesarean sections that were not done properly. Now the womb can no longer carry, the uterus can no longer support another baby. You have people that have had maybe long periods of sexually transmitted infections that affect their reproductive system. You have conditions that may not necessarily support a baby, things like ectopic pregnancies and endometriosis and the likes. So it's really a broad perspective that you cannot really pinpoint at one particular variable and say perhaps this is what is causing this. And then also when we look at, we also question that survey in terms of the scope of the research. What are the parts of the population that these findings come from? You know, did they basically in the recent past we've realized many researchers just dwell in the urban populations where they sample there, but then when you go deep into the villages, you realize people are having 9, 10, 12 babies and all that. So I think for such a research that should inform us about such sensitive demographic issues, then it has to be done over a great period of time. It's not something you can run through months and you have a finding. This is something that needs a lot of research over the years, monitoring the behavioral changes, and therefore coming out with a qualitative research that shows exactly what's the state of things. So to that end, I think I would slightly differ with that perspective of that research.
And let me go to the headline of one of the dailies: a cheating nation. situation. Well, I don't want to go to the behavior itself. I don't want to be a moral cop, but talking about men in Kenya having an average of 7 sexual partners and women having at least 2. Again, I'm going to say I'm not going to the behavior itself or being a moral cop, but my point of concern is in regards to HIV and AIDS. Kenya being one of the African nations who have had the brunt of HIV and AIDS infections, and we are trying how we can bring them down. This kind of behavior, I don't think we are going anywhere, Wakili.
Yeah, it's not a good, I mean, going by the headline as they put it, it's not something to be happy about. It's not something to be happy about. I hope it's not about the optics of selling, but if you look at the whole demographic of Kenya and you try to discuss such things, being very sensitive issues, then it could be true, it could be holding some sense of truth, but us being Africans, I don't know from an African perspective whether that could be something which you should be able to
unfortunately,
so that's looking at it from the optics of the Western nations. But as Africans, I think, but then strictly speaking to what I think I understood from what the owners of the research were actually trying to say is that the cheating nation aspect is not actually a true perspective, because the kind of questions which they put out there was not that how many sweethearts do you have at the current moment. What they were actually asking is how many people have you ever been with for the entire lifetime. So depending on the scope of people they were interviewing or people answering the questions, they came up with an average of 7 for men and for women too. So that really explains it, because I mean, there could be a 60-year-old man who says I've been with 7 women. So it's so that's on average 1 person per every 10 years.
Yeah.
So that one you can't classify it as a cheating nation. So but then I mean the owners of the research will come and explain it better. I think they better go and interview them first. But from what I heard them say, that's what I tend to believe.
The bone of contention here, Wakili, is the spread of sexually transmitted infection. We are hearing that Nairobi and some parts of country have a super gonorrhea. Now we are having people who have multiple sexual partners. The war on HIV/AIDS cannot be won if this kind of behavior keeps on. And maybe these people are talking about 7. Maybe it could be higher or maybe it could be lower. So by the end of the day is that this is a risky place to be in.
It is a risky business if we go by the optics of what it is in the title of the nation. If we literally take it that way, then we are in the red zone. We need to do something quick, because as you have alluded to, HIV status of the country is that recently, I think late last year, we had the cases spiking. For one reason or the other, the places like Homa Bay and Nairobi and the larger cosmopolitan areas, there was really a spike, which even prompted the people of the AIDS Council to actually come out and say there's a problem, we need to address it sooner before it gets out of hand. Now, if we try and look at it from that perspective and actually find that whatever this research was saying is literally taken to be the true position, then we as a country, we need to actually move in quick and be able to curtail some of these behaviors and be able to sensitize our people more. Back in the day, we could see a lot of adverts, we could see a lot of efforts, a lot of NGOs. But then I think for the last between 5 to 10 years, we have seen a slowdown in terms of government effort, in terms of even donor funding towards HIV/AIDS. That could be the reason. So if we can be able to continue with that pick up from where we left and be able to progress in terms of sensitization, doing a lot of advocacy on issues, AIDS, and the treatments, of course, because those have to go hand in hand. So the Ministry of Health needs to really come up with a game plan and a clear strategy on trying to combat some of these issues. And then at the end of the day, also try to sensitize the general population on some of these risks, because it's really incumbent upon government to actually ensure that the population is well sensitized on some of these issues to avoid such catastrophic results which we are seeing now.
Alenga, our AIDS preference rates are not looking good, but some kind of behavior that was pointed out in the demographic survey puts us in a much more dire situation.
I think they say that journalism is verified gossip. So for the nation to come up with such a sensational headline, I think it's really, it's not really the true picture of things, because as Wakili said, you need to find out what other facts are you placing that against, you know, and what are the other countries you're putting into perspective, and then now comparatively saying, okay, we think we are a cheating nation. I think to just summarily say so would be quite presumptuous, because you know, and also putting into perspective the question that was asked, that how many people have you had within your lifetime? So I think for 7 for a man is really too low for an entire lifetime. It's pretty low. We should be asking why, you know. And I think when we discuss the issue of HIV infections, it's really a pertinent issue that I think in the recent past we've had a little bit of slowdown in terms of pushing the awareness and the uptake of antiretrovirals and the preventive measures that are involved. And also when COVID came in, we sort of shifted our attention to COVID at the expense of, and then during that time there was growth of the virus, the HIV virus, pretty much, and also given that people were home and people are not going to work and school, so there was a lot of idle populations, and that definitely caused a spike in the new rates. But most fundamentally to discuss is an issue that I think is very much at the center of new HIV or the great spread of HIV, and that is cross-generational sex, because you find you have young people that are already in relationships, in sexual relationships with older people, and the older people tend to think the younger people are more safer. They have not had many other partners before, and the younger generation tends to bow down to everything the older person says when they are in a relationship. So issues like protection, use of protection will not arise, because this teenager doesn't have much voice when they are together. So that is really where the issue is. And then when these teenagers get back to their fellow teenagers, they are also having other relationships. So the virus is spreading across due to that cross-generational relationships. So if that is dealt with, and I think it has a huge indictment to our parenting systems, because what is it that your child is doing? What are they up to? If you're having a teenager who is in high school and they are already buying clothes for themselves, they are already buying expensive phones for themselves, and you're not questioning what's the source of this money, then clearly you are losing up on a place that you should have been vigilant. So I think that is really what has posed a great challenge. And also I think we have a generation who did not grow during the times when HIV did not have the ARVs to mitigate the damage it does to your body. So I think some of us had the benefit of seeing how the virus would eat people up, and those pictures are still live in our mind, and you think about that and you shudder. You remember the videos Rafael Tuju would do a voiceover for, the ones will be shown in school, and they were really scary, and that sort of beat you up as an individual to think twice. But today we have the uptake of the ARVs, and people are looking much better, and we have lots of people. They say they are those people who wanapima ukimwi na macho. They look at you and they say, no, this one is safe. So that is also something we should consider. And then even besides that, there are also other sexually transmitted diseases that are even more dangerous than HIV, like HPV, human papilloma virus, and hepatitis B. They are more lethal than even HIV. So if we look at it from a broader context of sexual reproductive health, then it puts us at a place where we can make right decisions as Kenyans.
Well said, gentlemen, and I would like us to shift focus now to a little bit of
just before let me just add something small which I think has said, and it has touched me. Nowadays the issue of parenting needs to be really looked at because the aspect of cross-generational sex, which is actually alluded to, is something which is actually causing the virus to really skyrocket. Because you find nowadays parents are not even aware where the kids are even at night. And these kids are holed up in a room, a couple of them, you don't know what they're doing. And some of them will not be cautious. They're drinking, they're doing all sorts of things, and it's really a scare as a country. Parents need to actually play a key role. And there was a debate some time back whether we should be able to start the aspect of sex education in high school or primary, even as early as primary, because these things are very practical. And people say, no, we cannot do that. But I think it's time we need to revisit the discussion and be able to sensitize these kids, because they could be operating from a position that they don't know. But if they are actually sensitized from school, which is the best place anyway to sensitize them, we'll be able to avoid some of these issues of the older people engaging with teens and such things, so that we can be able to cut this down to something which is manageable.
I totally concur. And if you want to see exactly how they conducted it, the demographic survey, not only is it on social media, it's on the media, and also you can go to the website of the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. A lot is contained in that, but we will not touch everything. We have an issue on teenage pregnancies. The uptake of family planning is quite good in the country. So there are a lot of things that we can pick from that, including how the Kenya health system is, and what are some of the challenges that we have also faced. But because we are looking at the state of how the country is, allow me now to rope in what the head of state said yesterday. Well, yesterday, 17th of January 2023, marked the end of an era for the chairman of IEBC, Wafula Chebukati, Boya Molu, and also Professor Abdi Gulie, after their 6-year term was done, and also EACC chair Archbishop retired Eliud Wabukala. But there's something that the head of state said yesterday at State House. The day before yesterday, the chairman of the commission, before he left office, Wafula Chebukati, said that the August 15th, when there was announcement of the results for the presidential election, there need to be a probe in the conduct of a lot of people there and what exactly transpired. Yesterday, the head of state came up with a discussion that there was a attempt on the chairman of IEBC, that is Wafula Chebukati, by the deep state, so that to subvert the will of Kenyans, or to even not be able to announce the winner of the disputed 2022 August presidential election. And that is what will be forming part of our discussion. And we have Wakili, who is going to take us through what we expect in the recruitment of the chairman, and also the recruitment of the other commissioners of IEBC. I would like to start with you, Alenga. What do you make of that coming from a head of state? Just underscores how emotive and how life and death it is for electoral process in Kenya.
I think it should have come from someone else asking for an inquiry of the process to let us know what exactly happened before bombers, through the election period, and after bombers, and other emerging issues in that election of 2022, for purposes of number one, closure, and for purposes of sanitizing our electoral processes and making them meaningful to the extent that you and I can be compelled to vote again in 2027. When it comes from a sitting president who is a product of that election that we call, including himself, that it was not a clear contest, it becomes the product of that inquiry becomes more of a cognitive resonance issue, just to agree with certain facts that he agrees with in that election. So if it was being called for by an independent body or independent actors in the democratic space, then that makes sense. So for me, I'm thinking if the president calls for a commission of inquiry into that election, and then definitely it will be launched by himself, and then what will I really be reading in that commission of inquiry? So it means, it looks like the books, the books of the religious books, they are written by founders of those religions. So all the facts you get in there agree with the views of the founder, right? So to that extent, for me, I feel it's really cutting across the grain. And personally, what I think that the president should be doing, in all honesty, is trying to bring the country together, trying to galvanize the state, trying to answer the immediate questions that we have. We have immediate questions of ever rising costs of living. We have dwindling job opportunities. We have an education system that is becoming a quagmire. There is uncertainties about the junior secondary school and all that. There is uncertainties about university education funding. There is uncertainties about electricity in the country. The other day he spoke about stopping the increase of electricity costs, but nothing has ever happened. So we wonder, do they listen to him or they do not listen to him? So those are the issues the president should concern himself with at now. And then the other issues of trying to find out what the election had must be pursued by other actors in the space.
What do you make of that, Wakili? And that just shows how serious elections are in the country. And in his report, in his Monday report, Wafula Chebukati mentioned that IEBC commissioners should be accorded security, and lots of it for that matter, because he talked about they had to switch off their phones, they had to hide so that they may not be taken by the deep state, as the head of state talked about yesterday. That just underscores how emotive still elections is a matter of life and death to this moment in Kenya.
Bentry, I might tell you, there are some places you should not speak about election. Up to the current time we are speaking, you just go there, you pretend you don't know anything about politics, because you don't know what somebody is thinking about. You might find that somebody is actually listening to, but is planning to hit you hard. So you can understand the person or the stage of a commissioner and the ulabalu which happened in Bomas at the time of announcing, how much people might be hating them from different quarters. So I think I will tend to agree that they need their security, because we don't want to lose them. And then the job of being a commissioner has been a condemned job. Whether you do it well, or you do damned if you do, damned if you don't. So whichever the case, I think we need to afford them security, because we don't want to lose anybody due to some things which we could have controlled. Having said that, I will also want to echo to what Alenga said here, that of course the president should concern himself with the more pressing things to solve the Kenyan problem. But from also where I come from, the president having taken power under such circumstances, it also behooves him to actually be able to take the lead. We have a president who takes the lead on everything. I think he made that statement in the perspective, because I don't think anybody else will have said it. And of course, the opposition is not in the interest to even look at such things. So it's only him, as the Kenya Kwanza leader, to actually say some mistakes happened and we don't want them to happen in future. From where I come from, I think it's in good stride. We need to actually be able to commend him and be able to have that commission, because from a personal perspective, I feel something went wrong which we cannot be able to condone. There was some shame which happened to us as a country, that we can conduct an election which is praised by everyone. Then at the tail end, we lose it, and then there's a fight, and everybody is watching. Even the international media were saying, like, this is what we told you. It's happening. It's really going on. It has started. And this is how it starts, and it will move. Because if you ask even Kenyans from both sides, they say that was really unnecessary. And I think for us to avoid such things, we can't sweep such a thing under the carpet. We need to actually have a discussion about it and be able to formulate better laws on how election announcement or how the commissioners need to behave, because some of the things which led to that is because of the last minute rupture at the boardroom, but there was the cohesion among the commissioners was also not was not good. So if we can be able to come up with laws, now we do a lot of internal management rules and regulations on how the IBC should be able to conduct their affairs to avoid such a shameful act. I think it's something we can be able to go by. And now that we also, this is the right time, because the people who are involved are actually leaving office. So I don't think there's any other better time so that we can address these issues. Also, as we move forward, we don't have something at the back of our mind which we are not sure what is going to happen. We shall have mitigated some of these known challenges, because now there are known challenges. So that whoever comes in with the new rules and regulations to apply, so that we don't end up having such a shameful act.
And I totally concur, because it was quite shameful at the tail end after having interviews. Because I was at Bomas of Kenya for the better part, and even on that material day, I was at the Bomas, and we had done quite well. But at the tail end, a lot of issues.
Even your security was at risk.
My security was at risk. But Alenga, looking at what the Constitution says, about 6 months to the end of the tenure of a commissioner or a chairman, the head of state is supposed to have started that process of recruiting another chairman or another commissioner. Looking at what the Senate, of course, tomorrow will be having a special sitting to debate the IEBC amendment bill, but at the end of the day, we are last-minute people. It's more than what they have already exited office yesterday. They exited office yesterday, and now we only have one commissioner, Irene Masit, who is facing. I don't know who she's facing, because now she's just. Even the government has talked about these people. That is the majority leader. Talked about these people should just exit office. So should we wait for the tribunal to conclude its investigations into that commissioner, so that if at all she is exiting office, she just exits and we have a lean, clean IEBC, or if she is vindicated, then we can look for other commissioners as well?
I think we have a serious problem in terms of how we manage constitutional institutions. We have constitutional institutions, but our modus operandi is still stuck in the era where the president would rule by fiat. So we are still conflicted whether to allow these constitutional bodies execute their mandate in an environment of freedom and openness, or still we want to gag them, we want to manipulate them. So we are stuck, we are conflicted on those two paradigms. So, but then the problem that we face is that we continuously cultivate an environment of mistrust with the electoral process. We continuously sow seeds of doubt in whatever duty these commissioners perform, because first of all, we look at it from the perspective that they serve the powers that be. And I would slightly want to differ with Wakili's point of view that the commissioner's job is a condemned one, damned if you do, damned if you don't. If we go by history and then we pick the election of 2002 as a prototype, we realize that there's a commissioner who actually conducted an election that was flawless, and there was no complaint thereafter, and the wind stood, and beginning from there we could see a country proceeding well with its democratic engagements. And then in 2007, just like they say, one step forward, two steps backwards. And then progressively we have continued to go down, to go down in terms of how we hold the integrity of such offices. So if we have something to learn from, then we can learn from that election of 2002. And the commissioner that comes in from taken over from Chebukati must come with a mind of just wanting to give the country the best, because he has seen what happened in 2002, 2007, and how many people lost their lives because of the decisions or the conduct of the commission at the time. We saw 2013, 2017, 2022. So I think he has a huge resource to look at and then guide themselves in what manner they want to do, to go. And primarily it becomes an issue of personal integrity. You know, we cannot tell the commissioner what to be when he gets into that office, or whom to serve when he gets into that office. They know what to do. And the period also, you had actually said in a period of like 6 months before the commissioner's tenure comes to an end, there should have been a succession arrangement happening already, because this man or woman that will come in needs to learn a few things from the outgoing chair, and they do a handover process that allows him to settle well in the office. But then where we are, it's difficult.
Wakili, tomorrow we'll be having that special sitting at the Senate. Can you take us through what to expect after that, and what the timelines maybe?
The timelines about the IBC. Sorry, come on.
You can get the timelines for a recruitment of a chairperson, because it's going to take a couple of months.
Yes.
And a lot of people have talked about that we are not staring at a constitutional crisis. I believe, in my opinion, we are deep in that constitutional crisis. Or if we are not, then we are on the brink of it in terms of IEBC.
Yes, I mean, your fears are well founded, because if we delay on this process, we might end up into the red zone, but I don't think we are yet there. The reason why we are at this particular place is because of the election, which was very contentious. We should have planned better immediately after the election. The last election, we should have had whoever came into power to actually set things in motion, that the commission be able to be founded. But you know, that was not possible because of the circumstances which were surrounding him. And now this is the best time. Still there's time. We can be able to form that particular commission, which should be able to sit. Once the commissioners have been chosen, they are supposed to come expeditiously. Of course, now we are on the very end. Once they are able to sit and convene, and I think within a month or 30 days, the president, once he appoints them, we should be able to give them the word go on how soon they should be able. So we saw some commissioners who were given, I think, 30 days to come up with like the CBC people. We were given a short timeline.
30 days.
Yeah, 30 days notice to get to work. So once they start doing that, then of course we should be able to have a chairman in the span of from May, at least May, June. By May, June, we should be able to have somebody in office.
If we need anything at IEBC right now, yes, there is a CEO and there's a secretariat there. What happens? Because we cannot rule out anything can happen.
Yeah, anything can happen, but we are not hoping that it happens. Yeah. the secretariat should be able to stand in, and of course the commissioners are out. They cannot be recalled back. So the secretariat should be able to.
Could they have any powers to act perhaps on an acting capacity, or with reduced?
You see,
just like we saw President the former president Uhuru now had diminished powers soon after we elected the president, but he was still holding fort.
It's not a case of that particular incident because the commission and the secretariat have differentiated roles. So for the running, day-to-day running, it will be done by the secretariat. If you need to do something, they will be able to see it through, because it's a fully formed secretariat. There's nobody else left. Once now, the issues which involve the commission are the things which will have to wait till the commission is in place. That's where we can only have a challenge, and that's why we pray that we don't have a situation where we need something which is urgent, which is supposed to be done by the commissioners.
Alenga, looking at the recruitment process of the chairman of IEBC and looking at the previous chairman, if we mention all of them, I'm quite sure that Wafula Chebukati is the first one in Kenya to have ever completed his term. Looking since the Chesoni, and this is the first one to complete his term. But I will say that the IEBC chairman, Wafula Chebukati, as he exits office, is one of the guys with the toughest skin. Hardly had he settled down in 2017 than people were talking about, no, Chebukati must go, and we witnessed that in 2017, and even the right honorable former Prime Minister Raila Odinga decided, I'm not going to the ballot if that guy is the one who is going to be the referee. We want to avoid this, because looking at what the IEBC, we have come a long way, and looking at 2022 election, we should be building on that. What is the ideal person for this job?
I think it's very important for you that you have discussed the issue of the next chair and what we're going to look out for, and
away from political.
Yes, and in context, you have actually alluded to Chebukati having served his tenure to the end. It must be remembered that Chebukati once vied for an MP position on ODM ticket, and he didn't win. So I think that should also guide us when we are looking for the next chair. We should not look for somebody who has ever had political interests here and there, because they could come in with maybe some scores to settle. I'm not really saying that that is what happened, but I think there is a place that also plays in your performance of your duties. So, and then so who is the kind of chair we are looking for? We're looking for a Kenyan who understands what is happening in the politics of the country. We are a young democracy that is eagerly growing, you know. If we place ourselves amongst our peers in the region and even in Africa as a whole, we have demonstrated that we have the interest of growing politically and holding on to certain tenets of democracy that matter, you know. So we need somebody that can help us to propagate that. We need a chair that will have in his leadership, the place of dialogue will be very much accentuated, in the sense that he can sit down with the parties, the players in the contest, and they can talk and iron out issues, so that there is no space for building up assumptions and drawing conclusions. That is what really happened during Chebukati's time, because I don't know if he's naturally a quiet person who doesn't want to talk much. I don't know. Or if he was simply ignoring people, you may not really know. So while he did that, he created a lot of room for people to make up assumptions, for people to create things about him and conclude, you know, so that every time IEBC was coming to speak on an issue, it would be post facto, after the fact. You remember even issues like acquisition of materials would have like the journalist being told to run to JKIA that there's material coming in, and then people be like, you actually brought materials. Even some of the commissioners will be like, so we have materials coming in. And then he will now explain, okay, we ordered the materials, this is what we are bringing them in batches. So already that cultivates a high level of integrity issues, suspicion that you cannot cure in one press, And then issues like, remember the printing of an extra booklet of Form 34As, and then now after he's asked, then he now says, okay, that one we'll just send it to the polling station, then you can package it and bring it back to us. Then somebody asks, so why printing it, And even in terms of, you remember we had a comical moment on TV when one of the journalists, I think it was Ayub Abdikadir, who is now at Citizen, asked issues about a company that was going to run the election. And there, the CEO was saying, I don't know, I don't know about those facts.
I'm learning about them now.
I'm learning about them now, this presser. So it put us in a very embarrassing situation. So we want a commission that talks to the parties, because the commission is a Kenyan commission. The political parties and other stakeholders in the election are all Kenyans. So if we have them talking through the 5 years, it's so that by the time we are getting into the election, we have ironed out most of the issues, because you remember most of the issues we have are issues of perception. Some of them may not even be legit, but it's just how we saw you passing at near Harambe House. What were you doing there? And you're the chair. So we just want a commissioner who can be able to talk to us, talk to Kenyans, talk to political parties, talk to the government, talk to agencies, the security agencies, hold meetings and disseminate the information to the public so that you winners are off suspicion.
Council, looking at, of course, the ideal man or woman, do you believe that we should maybe wait for the outcome of the tribunal that is investigating the last standing commissioner, Irene Masit, before we start the recruitment process?
I think Masit, she has insisted she needs to have a day in court or a day.
And now we have to look for 5 other commissioners and a chairman. I'm quite sure there are some people who will have jitters about her being one of the commissioners. So if at all the commission, we don't know how the tribunal will rule, but if at all the tribunal will say that he needs to go, now we have the best opportunity in the world to have commissioners and a chairperson all coming in clean
or fresh,
and we will avoid a lot of loopholes and a lot of suspicion, because Kenya, we have a political trust deficit.
That is true. I tend to agree with what you are saying. We need to actually know what is the predicament of Irene Masit before we make any conclusive further steps, so that that will act as a precursor of what actually we'll be doing. Otherwise, we might be able to proceed or run with the process so far, and then, as you say, she's cleared and the process so far, and then, as you say, she's cleared and she's back to the commission. If she's cleared, but there's also the possibility of her being cleared and say, I don't want the job anymore, you pay me, go. So that is also another possibility. Or she could actually be told, yes, but now we don't feel that you should be in place. We are officially terminating your services, but then you will be able to be entitled to your terminal dues.
The Hagus look like it has been cooked already.
we don't.
What we had, and why I'm saying this is because the leader of majority said that the honorable thing that these commissioners should do is to resign, and we have seen already 3 have already resigned.
Of course, the chairman of the commission is entitled to whatever opinion or whoever is instructing him. But you see, in this country, it's not based upon the chairman of the tribunal to tell you to quit. You have an inherent right to actually fight for your rights to the end. And if Irene Masit says she wants to be given a fair chance to explain herself or to vindicate herself or not, let her be given that. If still the commission, the commission is not an end to itself, they will give their recommendations that she should be sacked. If she feels that the commission was unfair, she still go to court, and the court will look at the facts afresh. And if they actually find that indeed the tribunal really didn't carry itself in the manner in which it was supposed to carry, or didn't give her the right of audience which she ought to have been given, then, or didn't consider some of the evidence she actually adduced, then court will be able to rule otherwise. So this is not a process which you run and then the commissioner says, now your case is already finished, just go home. It's not like that. If we were to operate in a country which is actually run by whoever is in authority, whatever it says, and we go by it, it will be a very sad state of affairs. So I think, as you said earlier, let's just first know what is the predicament of Irene Masit as we proceed forward on any other steps which we'll be making.
All right, Alenga, yes, as you wrap it up.
I think something we also need to look at, Wakili, is when Irene Masit was taken to the tribunal, it was not really distinguished who is her accuser.
Yes.
That's a really
such a situation, really.
So you even if the tribunal makes a ruling, then the tribunal has to tell us it's making a ruling for who, because we do not know who took Masit to the tribunal. Is it the president? Is it the chair? We do not know. And then now establishing because the tribunal has a responsibility to find if Masit, just by my assumption, the tribunal has not even said what the objective of that sitting, what they want to establish. But let's assume they want to establish that Masit interfered with the outcome of the election. So number one, we would want to know who is her accuser and who is supplying the evidence to the effect. So for you to establish that criminality,
the culpability element has got to be tested beyond reasonable doubt. That it's also good that we have such practices, because at the end of the day, how do you just castigate somebody that you operated with a group which you don't like? Now the group has left, you also need to go.
And even what Kenyans should also remember is that since the election, Irene Masit has never said anything about that election. Even on the day that her counterparts were speaking, she never said anything. So we don't know her position.
Much as also even the others resigned, I think I will tend to agree that we need that tribunal to actually be formed for all of them, so that
even if they decided to resign, to know exactly what transpired.
We know what actually transpired, so that we find not even for them, actually for the country, so that we are able to solve ourselves of whatever challenges they faced. We're able to know 1, 2, 3, this is what they faced,
and we also avoid
and then in future. Also we have further recommendations on how to solve it, so that Parliament can be able maybe to enact laws, or if it's about coming with regulations, so that whoever comes into office cannot face the same challenges forward in the next election.
I think Wakili's point is very, very strong, that Kenyans really need to know that, because if you select 4 people and you're subjecting them to a tribunal about an election, it's like you have isolated good ones and bad ones. It's like you're saying Boy Amolu and Chebukati and Professor Abdigulia are the good ones, these are the bad ones. So it's already like it's a predetermined end, You have
the good apples and the bad apples.
So even after this tribunal is ended, let's have a whole commission where all these people appear and they all tell us exactly what happened, so that we can have a conclusion. And now as Kenyans, we can draw a tea table and determine, which are the bad fruits and which are the good ones.
All right. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. But allow me to also appreciate other people who had kept watching since we started. Ibrahim Obuaka, thank you so much. Geoffrey Aruba was also watching. Brian Akina, you say you're live from Kayola. Big up, guys. Eugene Watangwa, is a great work. I'm in Uganda following up. Kavuma Dio, Dennis Karia, good work. Karibuni, munifollow hapa FB, Sauti ya Mkenya. Chikwa, is a great job. Well, they keep coming. Mzungu Ndigo, Darigube, watching live. If you know Gori, you say you're also live. But we unfortunately have run out of time. We've come to the tail end of News Check. this Wednesday morning. Thank you so much for joining. In the next couple of minutes, you will be with my colleague Khalid Abdullahi on the other side of the studio for Kurunzi Mashinani and Tamrini. I was hosting an advocate and a constitutional lawyer and also a governance expert. That is Wakili Gibson Gisore. Thank you so much, Wakili. And also we have Toro Stad Alenga, who is a leadership and governance expert. Gentlemen, always a pleasure having you on board. Thank you so much for your time and for your insight. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ben Troy Njue. Lucy Maura has been our sign language interpreter for this live program. Let's continue the conversation on social media.
What am I even thinking? My Jenny's in Denmark now. You know what I don't like the most about you? Not only are you subpar, but you find excuses for your mistakes and waste everyone's time.
Dear Julia, work is important, yes, but never forget, we are a sweet home.
I'm going to keep my word. I'm going to keep it. I'll keep it.
Listen to me. Something happened at the hotel today, and you're totally not going to believe it. For now, I won't tell her. But honestly speaking... Oh... Harvey, bye. You almost knocked me off balance today.
Since my father had put you on a pedestal here, he won't throw you out on the street when I tell him what you really are, when I tell him the truth? Don't you think he'll do that? You shut up! Who is your lover? Who are you betraying my father with? Tell me! The one who has a lover is you! What happened was that I saw you. I'm well aware it was you who started the fire.
Speak up! Where did you get the idea that Malena has a lover?
Malena! Malena is cheating on you, Daddy. Your wife has a lover.
Your presence has never been an issue with my family.
I don't want to compete with Fabiola. In spite of it all, I still do love her.
Santos Chifira. Unafanya kazi gani?
Mimi nauzanga mawabling na wagon. Kwani wewe peke yako tu hapo kwa hiyo mtaa wewe ndio uko na mkokoteni? Lakini ni wagon yangu ndio imepatikana kwangu. Mimi nikiwapeaga wagon renangwa, wanakuja magizgiz, wananipiga ngadua ama ruas.
Hiyo ni nini?
Wewe kuna mkokoteni yako ipotea?
Mimi hakuna mkokoteni.
Na uko na mikokoteni?
Hapana.
Uko na ambulance hiyo?
Sina.
Na ulikuwa unakuja kutufanyia first aid hapo kwa Kiraimsini kama nani?
Munangere ndio nini?
Ni pesa.
Unasikia?
Huyo hana kitu.
Wewe unaweza mlipa huyu?
Nani?
Wewe.
Mimi sina kitu ya kumlipa na mlipa.
Sasa kwa nini unauliza swali ambayo haitakusaidia?
Wasana na hiyo yote. Hiyo barabara ni yako.
Barabara sio.
Na ni uongo pia that aliacha kazi Kisima Drops.
Vile aliacha kazi na hii ni kesi mbili tofauti.
Oh my God, Melissa!
No.
Oh, she's still my daughter, regardless. Not a word about this to anyone. It stays between us. You.
Melissa.
She doesn't need to know this.
Doesn't need to know what?
Listen.
Say to make it right, 'cause I need your arms around me every night. For me in a reggae party, me the in a the car. Me have a drink in a me left and a me right, and have a spliff of marijuana.
So dakta kabisa, mpenzi mtazamaji, ni Jumatano nyingine ya tarehe 18 mwezi wa Januari mwaka 2023. Wakati mwingine tunakongamana hapa mtazamaji ni kufahamisha taarifa za kurunzi mashinani. Natumai adhuhuri yako inakuendea vyema. Karibu tuandamane hadi tamati. Mimi ni Khalid Abdullahi. Mtazamaji, baadhi ya wanachama wa bunge la kaunti ya Wajir wamekosoa mchakato wa kuajiri na kupandishwa vyeo walimu unaotekelezwa na maafisa wa tume ya kuajiri walimu katika kaunti hiyo kutokana na madai ya ufisadi. Wakilishi wadi hao wametoa wito kwa tume ya TSC na taasisi husika kuchunguza madai hayo ya ulaji hongo.
Baadhi ya wanachama wa bunge la kaunti ya Wajir wameshtumu maafisa wa tume ya kuajiri walimu kutokana na madai ya kuhusishwa kwenye ufisadi wakati wa shughuli ya kuajiri na kuwapandisha ngazi walimu. Wakiongozwa na mwakilishi wodi ya Wakberi Adan Bule, wakilishi wodi hao walisema shughuli hiyo imesheheni ufisadi.
Appointments and promotion of teachers in this county is not merit based, and the highest bidders are the ones appointed. Thus, there is a total corruption in that office. There are allegations that the office has been turned to a commercial center. Even the recent recruitment of teachers were forced to pay a huge amount of money.
Walitoa wito kwa tume ya TSC kuimarisha juhudi zake na kuweka mikakati ya kutathmini utekelezaji wa shughuli hiyo katika eneo hilo.
Take a loan to facilitate the recruitment. This is something that has never happened and we are witnessing in Wajir. We are therefore appealing to TSC CEO and the relevant arms of the government for urgent intervention to bring sanity to this office, which is currently turned into a cash cow.